On March 24th, 1992, Triple H had his very first professional wrestling match. And almost to the day, 30 years later, on March 25th, 2022, Triple H announced his retirement from the ring. More than 6 months had passed since WWE issued a statement saying that Paul Levesque had undergone a successful procedure following what they described only as a cardiac event. They were very vague about it. They said the episode was caused by a genetic heart issue and he is expected to make a full recovery. And since that time, there have been no further updates on his health. A lot of speculation, but no further updates. He has not been seen on television, even on social media. He wasn't exactly, terribly active. Here and there he would post stuff and retweet stuff. But they, tore down the NXT brand that he created and took it in a totally different direction. They got rid of a lot of the people on his team who used to work for him and fired them, among many, many other people. And without knowing for sure, it just felt like this cardiac event that they described was probably a lot more serious than they were letting on. Because it didn't seem like they were expecting him back in his old role anytime soon. On Friday, he broke his silence in an interview on ESPN with Stephen A. Smith. So he may never wrestle again, but he still knows how to get heel heat by forcing me to sit through a Stephen A. Smith interview. As it turns out, it was a lot more serious than anybody could have imagined. He said that around SummerSlam time last year, he was very busy doing a lot of different things, and they were having tryout camps. I know they had at least one out there in Vegas, and he had his hands and his tentacles in a lot of different things, and he started to feel very run down. He was starting to feel sick, and he thought that he had COVID. He said that he had COVID before, and he was experiencing similar symptoms, but when he got tested, he was negative for the virus. And instead, he was diagnosed with viral pneumonia, which got progressively worse to the point that Stephanie noticed that he was coughing up blood. Kind of a problem if you start coughing up blood. And when he went to go get checked out, they found fluid in his lungs and around his heart. The tests showed that his ejection fraction, which measures the percentage of blood leaving your heart each time it squeezes. Basically, it's a measurement of how well your heart pumps blood with each beat. His fraction was 30. In a normal, healthy person, it should be in the 55 to 60 range. So that was not a good sign. And so when he got the text message about that from one of his doctors, they told him, pack a bag and get to the emergency room. I'll fill you in on the way. By the time he got there, his ejection fraction was down to 22, and he was officially in heart failure. As he says, he was in heart failure bad. And by the next morning, his fraction had plunged to 12, just as he was going in for a heart cath procedure. And he said, I was nosediving and at the 1 yard line of where you don't want to be for your family and your future. He said when they got inside, he had genetically a 99% blockage in his left anterior descending artery, which is what they call the widowmaker. His heart had started to create a secondary pathway, but that was also clogged. So basically, he was a dead man walking and didn't even know it. He was moments away. If he had a clot or if he had any type of thickening, he was a goner. That was it. Lights out. That's how close he was to death. He said his father had a triple bypass at age 62. He said his grandfather died at 70 from heart disease. But what he did not know was that his great-grandfather died suddenly at 52. So you see a pattern developing here. It was a genetic issue. And when Stephen A. pressed him on, even knowing his family history, did you ever suspect that something like this might happen? Triple H, he praised the WWE wellness program. He said he was checked all the time. He never had high blood pressure. He never had high cholesterol. He did say that he had what he referred to as an athletic heart, which he said is a common thing in a lot of athletes, and that his heart did show some enlargement. But there were never any issues, and it all came out of nowhere. He got emotional talking about his 3 girls, who range in age from 11 to 15, And he said there were moments where they were putting him under for anesthesia for various procedures, and he wasn't sure if he'd ever wake up again. And that's a tough pill to swallow. And when asked what the future holds for him, he said as far as in-ring, he's done. He will never wrestle again. WWE had this all queued up, because as soon as he made the announcement, out went the press release, out went the announcement on WWE.com that Triple H has officially retired from in-ring competition. He says he's done in no uncertain terms. He says, I'm done. He says now he has a defibrillator in his chest. You know, Scott Hall had one in his chest as well. He had a pacemaker too. But he joked, he goes, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to get zapped on live TV. And, you know, when it comes to stuff like that, you can't take bumps, or you're not supposed to, because the wiring can be knocked loose and all of a sudden this thing isn't working the way it's supposed to and you don't know it. And then the day comes that you need, you know, to get shocked or zapped or whatever, and the thing doesn't work and then you're dead. I can't imagine that WWE would even consider clearing him for any kind of physical contact bumps or anything like that. So, yeah, again, it may not be something he wants, but I do believe he's done. When he says he's done, he's done. I'm sure they've told him, you're done. He did reveal that he had previously talked to Vince McMahon last year about plans for him to get back in the ring at WrestleMania this year in Dallas. They had a plan. They had an opponent in mind, but then all of this happened, and that plan obviously went out the window. And immediately, people online started throwing Cody's name around. Oh, it must have been Triple H against Cody. There was no Cody in WWE. That wasn't a thing when those two came up with whatever opponent they were going to come up with. If they were having conversations last summer about Triple H doing something in Dallas, Cody Rhodes was not part of that conversation at all. Unless Cody Rhodes had some kind of pre-existing plan in place, secret plan with WWE that he was going to go there when his contract ran out. No, it wasn't Cody. Honestly, the first name I thought of was AJ Styles. AJ has made no bones about the fact that he wanted to work a match with Triple H. He would pester him about it. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the idea they had in mind. Only he and Vince McMahon know for sure what the plan was. But he said he's been back in the office for a while now. He's had to step back a bit, though, and he's still in recovery. His endurance is not what it used to be before. Right now, he says he's focused on recruiting talent, and he put over Gable Steveson, who just won his second NCAA wrestling title, and he retired from the sport. He's going to be making an appearance at WrestleMania next weekend, and then he's going to be on Monday Night Raw very soon. If you remember, Steveson was the last name drafted to the Raw brand in last year's draft. So he's going to Raw probably in the next couple of months. We'll start seeing him on Raw. But hearing him talk about how close he came to instant death is very scary. It's a very scary thing. This man is in heart failure. I mean, just because he's doing better now than he was 6 months ago does not mean that he isn't still suffering from heart failure. He very likely is still considered to be in heart failure. Now, we don't know what his heart measurement is at this exact moment relative to what it was before. You know, he talked about it being 30 and then 22 and then 12. I can't imagine it's 12 or 22 anymore, but is it considered normal? Is he back in a safe zone? We don't know. It could still be low enough to constitute heart failure. You know, we all remember the Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior came back, he went into the Hall of Fame, and then he showed up at WrestleMania the night after that, and then he cut that promo on Raw the following night after that. And then he dropped dead of a massive heart attack the very next day. It was a very bizarre sequence of events. But you go back and you listen to the Warrior and his words in that promo on Raw, and how could you not come away from that thinking that in some way, even subconsciously, if not very consciously, this man had some kind of feeling or premonition that he wasn't long for this earth when he said what he said on that show. It was a very weird weekend. But we all remember that. Triple H helped bring the Warrior back together with Vince McMahon, and you know, things like that are going to be part of his legacy as well. In terms of him in a suit behind the scenes working as an executive in WWE, him bringing people like the Warrior and like Bruno Sammartino back into the fold and mending those fences, which never would have happened were it not for Triple H. I remember, Triple H going to Vince and saying, hey, what about Bruno? And Vince was like, good luck with that. You want to try, you want to waste your time, go ahead. And he managed to pull it off. And all these guys now, Bruno, Warrior, they're gone. But at least they were able to mend those fences first. And I think that is part of the legacy also that Triple H has in this company. As much as anything he ever did in the ring is him being able to, facilitate things like that. But like Triple H, the Warrior had a family history of heart disease. His father and his grandfather both died from it in their mid-50s. And he knew he would die young. He told people around him that he thought he would, especially after all the steroids he took. And he told them he had no regrets. Because without them, without the roids and everything he did, there would not have been an Ultimate Warrior. And to me, I hear this and it boggles the mind that somebody would be aware of their family history of heart problems and would still choose to pump their body full of stuff that they have to know is going to take years off their life. I mean, we may as well address the elephant in the room. Dumbo, he's off over there in the corner. You can't miss him. I've been getting questions about this since Friday. Asking about Triple H and steroids and some people saying, well, it's his own fault. First of all, he did have a genetic condition. So I think it's a little simplistic to attribute this to, steroid use or just steroid use. But did it help? Whatever substances he may have been using over the years, did it help? Of course not. And knowing that you have a family history of heart problems, as he knew, and still choosing to do that stuff is a risk that he chose to take. We all make choices in life. But I do think there is a little something called empathy that more people should probably have in situations like this. When you hear that the man, he's talking about this and he almost broke down talking about his kids. I feel bad for them having to see their father go through something like that. More important than any wrestling match, this man is just lucky to be alive and to be able to be with his family. You work your whole life. You climb the ladder. You accumulate all this wealth as he has. You live in a nice house or houses. You start a family. And for what? To turn around and drop dead one day? Work yourself to the bone, go home, and then, keel over face first on the floor? At 52? Because that's what almost happened to him. At some point, you need to stop and smell the roses and enjoy the fruits of your labor, and the man has earned the right to do that. He doesn't have anything left to prove in the ring. The last official match of record of Triple H's career will go down as a tag team match in Tokyo, Japan, teaming with Shinsuke Nakamura against Samoa Joe and Bobby Roode. And it just feels right that his last two televised matches were against Dave Bautista at WrestleMania 35 and Randy Orton a few months later in Saudi Arabia at Super Showdown, the two men that he personally handpicked and groomed for Evolution. Now, he did have a fight with Orton on Raw in the Thunderdome last year, but that technically wasn't a match. I don't even think they had a referee out there for it. That was just a shitty Fiend angle with Alexa Bliss where the lights went out and Triple H vanished. We never saw him again. And then she shot a fireball at Orton's face, and we ended up with Lucha Orton in a mask for 2 weeks because of his severe burns, which magically healed in record time. The truth of the matter is this. Triple H's best days in the ring were long behind him. It has been years since he has had a truly enjoyable match. Most of his stuff in recent, not all of it, but most of his stuff in recent years was very plodding, very boring, and it would go half an hour because he had it in his head that his matches had to go that long, when really they didn't. They didn't have to go that long. The last truly great match of Triple H's career was WrestleMania 34, where he teamed with Stephanie against Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey. That was in Ronda's debut. That was an excellent match. It was the match of the night. So much fun. But after that, his best days were behind him. So even though his career may not have ended on his terms the way that he wanted it to, I mean, look, nobody ever wants to be told that their career is over. They want to be able to write their own ending. Not everybody gets to do that. Undertaker was able to do that with the Boneyard match. Shawn Michaels was able to do that at WrestleMania 26. But Stone Cold didn't. One of the biggest stars of all time, he didn't. Hulk Hogan, another one of the biggest stars of all time. He'd still be wrestling now if he hadn't had 10 back surgeries. He didn't get to write his own ending. Kurt Angle didn't. You think he wanted to work with Baron Corbin at WrestleMania in his last match? He wanted to work with John Cena. But Triple H should have no regrets about the career that he had. 24 championships, including 14 world titles, a 2-time Royal Rumble winner, King of the Ring winner, multiple-time WrestleMania headliner, in the Hall of Fame as a member of DX, and he'll get his own solo induction in the next few years. That goes without saying. I mean, hell, he could probably end up going into the Hall of Fame, the first 3-time Hall of Famer. He can go. He's in as a member of DX. He can go in as a solo inductee for his career alone, and when all is said and done, he could go in as an executive. Wouldn't shock me. He becomes the first 3-time Hall of Famer at some point. But, in his in-ring career, he was never the guy. And I talked about this for the first time years ago. I said he was never the guy. He was always the guy who worked with the guy. But he got to work with them all. His career spanned multiple eras of WWE, the New Generation era, the Attitude era, the Ruthless Aggression era, the PG era, the Reality era, right on up to the modern era. The one thing, honestly, that I'm surprised he never did was work a match in NXT. Like a big takeover match against one of his chosen rising stars that he could put over. He never did that. I never saw Triple H as a main event talent until the street fight with Cactus Jack at the Royal Rumble in 2000. That opened my eyes to Triple H as a top heel in the company. Up to that point, he had a few main events, late in 99. You knew they were trying to make him. They started the McMahon-Helmsley regime stuff, but then came the match with Foley, and Mick Foley did more for Triple H's career than any other single talent, save, I would say, for one, and that would be Chyna. Because putting Chyna together with Triple H was a game changer for Triple H in his career. But as far as working in the ring and their storylines and feuds on TV, nobody did more for Triple H than Mick Foley. For me, that street fight is when he truly arrived. And I've said this before, Triple H in the year 2000, from January on, is my all-time favorite period of Triple H's career. Physically, the man was at his peak. This was pre-quad tear, the first one. His work in the ring was excellent. That is my favorite era of Triple H. He was a tremendous heel. And he and The Rock together, those two carried that company while Steve Austin was out recovering from his spinal fusion. When I think of Triple H's career, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm eulogizing the man, but since his wrestling career is done, I think it's appropriate to talk about this. I think of the pairing with Chyna. I think of the birth of D-Generation X and how jarring it was for him overnight to go from the Greenwich snob to pointing at his crotch and telling people to suck it. That was quite the sudden character shift. I think of the new DX, the second version of DX, when he took over as the leader after WrestleMania 14. That is my favorite version of DX. I think that is the best version of DX. Better than the original. I think all of the matches that he had with The Rock, I think of those matches. His greatest rival in the ring, The Rock, the ladder match at SummerSlam, where he injured his knee. Pretty serious knee injury. Still finished the match, won the title, and then had to vacate it, but, finished the match, and what a tremendous match it was. Their Backlash match, when Stone Cold came back and laid everybody out with the chair. Their Iron Man match at Judgment Day, still my favorite Iron Man match of all time. Of all the 60-minute matches they've done in that company, Iron Man style, that one remains my favorite. I think of the love triangle storyline with Kurt Angle and Stephanie, how entertaining it was and what a shitty, abrupt ending it had. I think of the two-man power trip and the quad tear on Raw, where again he finished the match on one leg. Then there's the comeback in Madison Square Garden in 2002, one of the loudest ovations of all time. The Angle, years later, where he kicked Randy Orton out of Evolution. Right, that's a very memorable angle. I think of his reign of terror. Can't think of Triple H without thinking about the reign of terror. In the dark days of Monday Night Raw, little did I know there would be even darker days ahead. I didn't know how good I had it back then. The Katie Vick angle and him fucking a corpse. What he did to Booker T at WrestleMania. I think of the famous Am I Fucking Going Over story that one of the writers told. Famous story. Him beating CM Punk when Punk was the hottest thing in that company in 2011. Even if it did take 3 pedigrees, it never should have happened. Beating Sting at WrestleMania, which was inexcusable. But also putting Batista over in 3 straight pay-per-view main events and cementing him as a top guy. The Authority angle, which did no favors to people like Dolph Ziggler and, Ryback. But in the end, he put over Daniel Bryan in the strongest possible way. Daniel Bryan didn't need Triple H to put him over the way he did. He was already the biggest thing in the company at the time. But in the end, he did the right thing and he put Daniel Bryan over in the strongest possible way. Even if it only happened because his WrestleMania match with Punk fell through when Punk walked out on the company. But his greatest legacy is what he created with NXT. And the talent that he worked with and brought in and worked with to try to help them, the talent he signed. He basically raided Ring of Honor of all of its key talent and took them for himself to create his own super indie. He had these plans for world domination. They were going to open performance centers in all these different countries, and you're going to have, we have NXT UK, and we were going to have NXT Japan, and we probably would have had NXT Australia, and maybe Canada, and all these different places, all these different ideas that he had. But he took all this talent, created his own super indie. He brought in names like Samoa Joe, who WWE had no interest in for so many years. Physically, he didn't fit what they were looking for. So we missed Joe in his prime physical years. By the time he got to WWE, even then in 2015, he was no longer in his physical prime or physical peak. He had racked up a lot of mileage, a lot of injuries. But he brought in Joe. He brought in Finn Balor, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Adrian Neville, Shinsuke Nakamura, Adam Cole, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, American Alpha. The women's division he put together down there with Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, Bayley, Asuka, Paige, Shayna Baszler, Rhea Ripley. That era of the black and gold was the best television that WWE has produced, really. I mean, if you think about that whole period, and we're probably talking about a good 5 or 6 year period, really? 6 or 7 year period. It was the best television most of that period that WWE was putting on. NXT became my favorite show of the week. Sasha Banks against Bayley in Brooklyn. Johnny Gargano against Andrade Cien Almas in Philadelphia. Adam Cole against Johnny Gargano, WrestleMania weekend in New York. Incredible matches, some of the best matches of the last decade. All of which came under Triple H's vision of what he wanted NXT to be. And for that, I owe him thanks. He may not be involved with NXT anymore, but if he has a hand in recruiting and grooming the stars of tomorrow, I can only hope that whatever good he did for the people during that black and gold era, he can do the same for those people as well. He got it right. More often than not, he got it right with NXT. And I had a level of faith in him and the people writing for him and working under him. Kind of the same way I felt about Lucha Underground. I very much enjoyed Lucha Underground. Did I agree and like every single thing that they did? No. But by and large, they were trying to tell stories in a very exaggerated way with exaggerated characters. But They were telling these stories. I had faith and trust in the writers of that show to do the right thing, have things, make enough sense where I didn't have to worry, like, what the fuck are these people doing? The way that I think about Raw and SmackDown when I watch it every single week. And that's the way I felt about NXT. I put my faith and trust in what they were doing because more often than not, they delivered. And they gave that audience who liked that product exactly the kind of wrestling and the kind of show that they were looking for. And that made it enjoyable. That made it fun. He gave them, the talent there, a level of creative freedom. If you listen to them talk about it, a level of creative freedom that was, taken away from them in a lot of cases when they hit the main roster. Some of them survived the call-up. Many of them did not. So often, they undermine these people and change things about them that worked, and they ignore everything they did in NXT before hitting Raw and SmackDown. I can only imagine the frustration that Triple H must have felt every single time he would see one of these talents get stripped of their name or their identity the moment they would get called up, or get called up and then flounder because they didn't have any ideas on what to do with them. Or called up and then weeks later, cut for no reason. Budget cuts. Time and time again. And then to see everything you've created just blown up while you sit at home convalescing from this near-death experience. I don't feel bad for Triple H as much as I do the talents themselves who constantly get fucked over. But I can completely understand the frustration he probably feels whenever he sees something like that happen. But that black and gold brand is a major part of his legacy. And look, it got them 2 more hours of television time on USA Network. I sometimes hear the question asked, would Triple H have gotten as far as he did in his career? Would he be in the position he's in now without marrying into the McMahon family? And the answer is no. He would not have landed an executive role. He would not have been placed in the position of power that he was at the Performance Center and running NXT. No other star from the Attitude Era went on to do anything like that for the company. How many of those Attitude Era stars from his era back then have gone on to land big, cushy corporate gigs in WWE? Nobody. So, of course, yes, marrying the boss's daughter had its benefits. But I don't think he would have been any less of a major star and a Hall of Famer had he not married Stephanie. I think it is unfair to say that the only reason Triple H went on to become a big name and a big star in the ring and his career is because he married Stephanie McMahon. That I don't necessarily agree with. All the other stuff, absolutely, that's the only reason that happened. And he's in the position he's in. But I think it's unfair to say, well, the only reason he's a big star is because of that. You got to understand something. He would have gone on to have a very long, successful career. Because one thing that we have seen over these last 2 decades is that Vince McMahon likes his stars. And there aren't very many of them left anymore. Triple H was a star from the most popular era in the history of the company. They may be making more money now because they found all these other ways to make money and these TV contracts. But the product now is by no means as white-hot and popular as it was back then. He was part of that era. So he will always have had value to Vince McMahon because it is a star-driven company. I mean, look at WrestleMania this year. Pat McAfee in the ring, Logan Paul, Johnny Knoxville, bringing back Stone Cold Steve Austin. You don't think this isn't a star-driven company? I've said that before. There are a bunch of star fuckers in this company. They love it. They love the attention. But all those stars, Undertaker now is retired, Chris Jericho left the company. There aren't as many of them left. They're almost completely gone. Or retired. So yes, he would have had plenty of success for that reason alone, if nothing else. Because Vince McMahon needs his stars. And now that his in-ring career is over, if you're looking for some Triple H matches to go back and watch, I put a little list together. Very informal list, nothing ranked or anything. Here's a bunch that I think are worth watching and worth going out of your way to see. I mentioned earlier the ladder match with The Rock at SummerSlam 98. A great match. The Royal Rumble street fight with Cactus Jack, truly one of his best matches. The 10-man tag on Raw The month after that, February of 2000, Triple H and the Radicals against The Rock, Cactus Jack, Rikishi, and Too Cool. One of my all-time favorite matches in Monday Night Raw history. The Iron Man match at Judgment Day with The Rock. The Last Man Standing match that he had with Chris Jericho at Fully Loaded 2000, which I think is still their best match. I also quite enjoyed their Raw match before Backlash that year, where Jericho won the title, the Phantom title change. Jericho beat Triple H to win the title on the fast count by Earl Hebner. Place went nuts. I think they were in State College, Pennsylvania that night. Only in the next segment for Triple H to have Earl Hebner reverse the decision. That entire first 30 or 40 minutes of the show is still one of the best openings to Raw, I think, in the history of the show. The 3 Stages of Hell match he had with Steve Austin in No Way Out in 2001. WrestleMania 17 against The Undertaker. Doesn't get talked about nearly as much as their later WrestleMania matches are, but it should be. And the WrestleMania match they had in Atlanta at 27, 10 years after the one at X7. That was an excellent match as well. I know people also talk about the end of an era thing in the Hell in a Cell. I didn't like that match as much as I like the other ones, but it does have that great near fall. The most convincing near fall we've ever had, that the streak might just end. When Shawn Michaels, as the referee, super kicked Undertaker right into a pedigree. That was a great time. I was in the stadium that night. That was my first Mania live. And everybody fell for it. Everybody went nuts for that spot. The 2-man power trip against Jericho and Benoit on Raw for the tag team titles. That was the night Triple H tore his quad. A classic match. Too bad that it will never be talked about. They'll never show any kind of a highlights package. It won't be part of his Hall of Fame video or anything, but so that's unfortunate, but that was a tremendous match. The street fight with Shawn Michaels when Shawn came back after all, 4 years gone, SummerSlam 2002. The first Elimination Chamber match. He was a very big part of that match. He put Shawn Michaels over, who won the world title from him in Madison Square Garden. WrestleMania 20, Triple Threat. Shawn Michaels, Chris Benoit, Triple H. And the sight of Triple H tapping out at the end of that show. Again, a bittersweet moment to go back and watch now, but no less of an excellent match. The opener at WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans against Daniel Bryan. Also, excellent match. The 2 Evolution matches. When Evolution reformed in 2014, they took on The Shield in 2 pay-per-views, Payback and Extreme Rules. I think Payback was the one we got Blue Tista, which very much upset him. I remember him being very upset about that. I think he's still upset about that. I come back, we have this great match, and all you people want to talk about is that I wore blue. Like, he didn't understand. He really was greatly offended by this. But both of those matches, they put the Shield over strong. Those were 2 tremendous matches. There was a stretch of a few months there in the first half of 2014 that I think was Triple H's best in-ring work in many, many years. And then there's the mixed tag from WrestleMania 34. It was him and Stephanie against Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey. You can tell from this list here that there's way more in there from the earlier years. I think of Triple H more as a bottom-heavy guy than a top-heavy guy in terms of the weight of his career and which part of his career I kind of weigh more as far as the higher caliber of matches. But that's a pretty strong list, I think, for you to dive into. And by the way, since so many people have asked me, I'll keep this short. Yes, I saw Ryback's tweet about Triple H, and no, I am not talking about it beyond that, because that's exactly what he wants. His name was trending. I mean, he must have been over the moon to see his name trending, because why the hell else would Ryback's name be trending? Why else would his name be trending? Unless there was some kind of an incident or he died, there's no other reason for Ryback's name to ever be trending. It's the only reason he tweeted anything at all, to seek attention. Ryback has nachos for brains. Let him dip his head in cheese and shout into the void.